Hey everybody, this is Uncle Matt's D&D Neighborhood, and I'm Matt Finch, and today I have with me a couple of folks. The person I'm actually interviewing is Jason Hobbs. Jason, say hello to my fans, your fans.
Hey, all the fans, the Zach fans.
Yep.
Jeez.
And now we've also got Zach Glazer. Zach, say hello to all of the fans that you're going to have.
No. Hello, everybody.
Okay, so just want to remind everybody before we start, the standard intro here. Please subscribe to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon over at Uncle Matt, patreon.com/Uncle Matt. So if you want to support the channel, please go and throw a couple of bucks our way. But the topic for today, for which I have got Jason here, is that this year, 2018, we're going to fucking sweep the ENNIEs. That's Jason.
I don't have my Skeeter button going, dude.
Jason did not really know that I was going to open up quite that strong in terms of everything.
I like it. I'm down with it.
Yeah. So anyway, we've got there are not a huge number of OSR entries, but the reason that we're starting this up, Jason's podcast, Hobbs and Friends, is one of the just got the nomination for the ENNIEs, which is when I sort of turned this from doing just an interview to a sort of rah, let's everybody get together. Voting for the ENNIEs is going to be.
Good job, man.
Do what?
I didn't even know that yet. Now I know. Good job, Jason.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, so I mean, actually, here's an announcement that I already sort of did, but congratulations, Jason. You got nominated for the ENNIE Award this year.
Oh, thank you. It's quite an honor, actually, and I'm still kind of humbled by the whole thing, to be honest. I've never had anything like that happen. I haven't really published a lot of stuff. One of my buddies said it best, Eric Hoffman. He's on the episode that I put in for ENNIE nominations. He is part of Stormlord Publishing, and he said he worked his ass off for years writing stuff, never got an ENNIE nomination until he got on my show and just talked out of his ass.
And that is, so let me say a couple things about the ENNIEs here. First of all, this sort of campaign to go in and kick ass on behalf of people that you like is not only permitted under the ENNIE Awards, it's the way it's done. The ENNIE Awards The ENNIE Awards are a gladiatorial arena that has no rules whatsoever. And I figured that those of us who are, the folks in the OSR, the freeform play, used to taking on the world as it exists rather than having encounters scaled to your character, we ought to be a hell of a lot better, I think, at a no rules kind of atmosphere, and that we may be outnumbered, but I don't think we're outgunned.
Oh no way. I think someone was saying that some people didn't, like WotC didn't have as many awards, or maybe they didn't put any in. So there's a few huge 5e following, but the OSR has been picking up as well, especially like the art house version of the OSR, when you're talking about Lamentations with Zach and a lot of the really creative side of the DIY. They won last year. Zach's been winning a lot. Mike Evans with Hubris last year, also a huge OSR win, I think. So we're on our way up.
Yeah. Did James Spahn get one?
He won an Origins. I don't believe he's won an ENNIE. I don't know about that. Hopefully he lets me know.
Yeah, he doesn't. He's not on the board this year for the ENNIEs, which surprised me a little bit. But
so
say what?
I don't think James entered. So
that'll have that result of not being on the board
for sure.
So first of all, Jason's up for the best podcast award for Hobbs and Friends, and we're going to get to Hobbs and Friends when I'm done with my excitable we're going to go out and do this thing that normally doesn't happen before the interview. So we are actually going to get to you, Jason, instead of having me just talk forever. But there's the top where you're up there for the podcast. There's also Fear of a Black Dragon, which is sort of not traditional OSR. It's more of the intersection between story gaming and so on. And then Zach Smith is all over the place with Frostbitten and Mutilated. I think he's up for best setting, best writing, and best monsters in it. And then also Glenn Seal's Midderlands. He's up for the best cartography award. So with the slight exception here of the podcast award, it's basically free form. I mean, anybody can go and vote for all of that stuff. They're not voting one thing against another, and it's a ranked voting system anyway. So anyway, but that's the ENNIEs. We're going to sweep the ENNIEs, and we're going to start out by talking to Jason, and I'm going to go out and talk to Zach and to Glenn, both of whom I've already interviewed before, and we're going to get everybody together, and that means you, everybody who's listening. I need to make sure that my fingers are in the camera. That's you, to go out and vote for the ENNIEs in 2018. And so with that, Jason, tell me why it is that Hobbs and Friends is up for an ENNIE award.
Well, I think there's a few reasons. People ask me what Hobbs and Friends of the OSR is, and I often respond, well, I have no idea why anyone listens, to be honest. It's really just me often having a conversation with friends or people that I'd like to be my friends in the OSR and talking about their games, games we've been playing. And usually I like some sort of main topic or whatever. And I'll usually try to spotlight a product on each episode. Usually the guests that I have, but not always, sometimes, but not always. Other than that, honestly, I don't really know why anyone listens to the show. I've been saying that for a year and a half, ever since it went on. I have a really great editor, Chris Sneezak from Misdirected Mark podcast. I'm on the Misdirected Mark podcast network, which I believe helped propel the show faster than it would have otherwise, because there was always already a large group of people that are on that network. I'm the only OSR show on there. But the OSR shows, while they've been around, they were kind of more of the old grognardy type stuff. They weren't as really about newer. They weren't about the art house. They weren't about LOTFP. They weren't really about retro clones. They were really strongly about playing the old games. So I really feel like Hobbs and Friends was a little different, because it was more about I call myself a neo-grognard. So I've been playing.
It's awesome to make up words. I love that shit. That's one of my favorites.
So I feel like there's a large group of people like me that weren't around in the beginning when you wrote Osric, right? Or even when Swords and Wizardry started. Maybe they were playing Champions or whatever, and then they found that, hey, people are still doing this in the days of the internet. Everything's a rabbit hole, and eventually when you find it, it can be really eye-opening, and I guess I'm rambling a lot. Anyone else have anything to say for a while? I don't know.
Hey, rambling is the name of the game on this show. That's what we do. Zach.
I just said he just described me. That's how I came to it. As I all of a sudden just found a website and became instantly obsessed with people who played the games I liked. And I'm also in the feeling that I don't want to play first edition AD&D anymore, though I have a soft spot in my heart for it. I think there's great stuff coming out, and Glenn Seal's Midderlands is an example of stuff that we're starting to see for OSR type games that are bringing in not just new sensibilities, but new ideas that are awesome. So,
yeah, I think. Sorry. The cartographers are a really interesting group too, because you got sort of the triad of Alyssa Faden and Glenn and Dyson Logos all doing something that's very, very different from each other, but there's an old school feel to all of them, and it's all new. I mean, that's a sort of an interesting, the cartography. Glenn's the only one who's up for an ENNIE this year, but
that reminds me, when you were talking about who were on the ENNIEs list, I kind of locked up briefly, and so I didn't hear if you mentioned Jason Schultes of the Hydra Cooperative.
Holy shit! No, I didn't.
Well,
I didn't.
That is also up for an ENNIE. I just saw Hamza posted it on G+. So,
okay, I don't know how I spaced that on the list, because Jason and I are good friends. He did all of the artwork for the Borderland provinces that I did through Frog God. So yeah, major omission there, and we'll add him to the list of people that we're all going to support in gladiatorial old school fashion, defeating all comers, and the lamentations of the women and drive your enemies before you, and the whole Conan quote that I can't do from memory.
Yeah, I love Jason is an awesome guy. He was a guest on my show as well, and he's one of the guys who makes me laugh the most at GaryCon every year, other than Zach. I mean, you know.
Well, I'm glad I'm good for something.
So the all right, so that's the basic idea there. In terms of how you do the podcast, is that it's just fairly situational, got a general main topic, talking around that, working through it. So tell me a little bit about your friends. The OSR is part of the caption that you've got in there, and one of the interesting things I think here is that I've got a lot of 5th edition viewers, but they are the 5th edition viewers who tend to play 5th edition in a more freeform fashion, so what you could call more old school. And so those are people who I would encourage to go take a look at, or take a listen to the podcast and see what it's about. But Jason, what's your feeling? I mean, if you had to define the OSR, where do you think you'd come down on that in terms of just the general characteristics of what this group of people's about?
Honestly, on my show, I have said I'm never going to define the OSR because it's such a amorphous or amoeba-like. It kind of, as soon as you try to, fit it into a particular niche, it sort of kind of, you find other people that are interested in the OSR that don't really fit into that. I would say that I recently watched a video, though, of a guy who did a great job explaining exactly what the OSR is. And I actually shared it on my Hobbs and Friends community on G+. But it was you, Matt, actually. So,
oh, okay.
You did about a 15-minute show, and you were explaining the facets of the OSR. And since you've lived through it, I think you're a great person to maybe understand that. And I think you did a good job. You went over a lot of things. I probably, like I say, I'm a neo-grognard, and I think there's a large portion of us that are like that, because not all of us are Matt Finch or Daniel Proctor or any of those guys that started in the beginning. And we so
do that. So explain to me what is neo-grognardism, and we'll turn it into an ism, and you can be the father of neo-grognardism.
Ooh, I don't know about that. I don't want to have that kind of responsibility.
So lay out your manifesto, father of neo-grognardism.
I'll sign up for his newsletter.
Yeah, I'm interested in this topic. I'll sign up for the newsletter too. So you've got a start of 2 right there.
I actually know quite a few people. We're the guys who found the OSR later. It wouldn't have been in the early days, but probably later, and most likely on the blogs, and then made our way to G+, where it seems like a lot of people were for quite a while, until the last year or so, where I feel like the OSR is kind of splintering under its own weight. But for me, I'm a 40-something guy. Unfortunately, probably a cis white male. Most of us, not all of us, but a large portion of us, which can
it's the vast majority. But
yeah, it is. And I shouldn't say it maybe negatively, because it's not necessarily negative, but for some people it has been, just because it's difficult for them to get in. The OSR has been called toxic, but I really feel like that's the people who aren't actually in the OSR. They're more on the fringes of it, and they hear about it from certain people in a negative light. And I always feel like if they actually joined in and found more people, they would find that it's not the majority. It's just a very, very, very loud few people.
We've definitely got some assholes, and and they're very loud assholes. And sometimes I even agree with what they have to say. But the thing is that you can be grading, and I think it's easy to bash on the OSR too. Even though it doesn't make sense, since what it really is, it's a way of playing a game. Sorry.
Yeah.
We were all bullied since day one. We can still survive this.
We'll make it. Back to neo-grognardia or neo-grognards. I guess it's the guys, like I was saying, our age, who are deciding that they didn't. 5th edition is cool and has a lot of aspects, because it's getting closer back to the old school way, but it's still not necessarily old school. We usually have a little bit of money in our pocket, and we have our heroes that we looked up to when we were in grade school and high school and college, and trying to make our way through. But we were, like I say, we weren't the guys who created the OSR, like your 153 with Raji and Bill probably, I guess. I don't know Bill Webb that well, but I'm assuming he's part of that group. But we still are interested, and we like the way that it's not non-vanilla. We're crossing the boundaries between fantasy and sci-fi again, which I think are all aspects of the OSR. And some of us aren't necessarily super nerds anymore. We have some abilities. We have normal jobs and we go out and we do things like normal, but we're also really we're in that niche of a niche where we're really into what we're doing. And so we enjoy those things. This is a good question, I guess. I always say neo-grognard, but I don't ever say, what the heck is a neo-grognard?
That's
like
why
all the dudes I play with.
That's why I have my show, is that we're,
focus on something.
Now you're on the spot. Let's,
There'll be a quiz after.
That's right. I'll put the quiz questions in the description of the video down below and let people. Well, no, I won't, because my whole thing on this show is that we're pushing the ENNIEs. I gotta keep focused on that. We're pushing the ENNIEs on it. So
okay. Have you ever won an ENNIE?
Yeah, I got a silver for Swords and Wizardry because I was up against Song of Fire and Ice. Talk about good timing on that one. The Song.
Oh yeah,
I totally beat on that.
Yeah, so I got second on mine, but it's still an ENNIE. And that's the other thing about the podcast is if we can drive both of you guys up to the top, you both got an ENNIE, even though one of them's a gold and one's a silver. Do they do a third? Is there a copper?
I don't think so.
I don't know.
I don't think
I don't know. I never got that high. I got nominated many times, but I never actually got to the point where I could win. But to be honest with you, what you're doing now is really helpful for the OSR, because 2014, when I did it, there was no kind of movement for it. And I was up against WizKids, Paizo, and I think I want to say Catalyst in one category. The other category was against Paizo, and it wasn't Wizards of the Coast, but someone just absolutely huge. And I was sitting with Mike Ballato watching the live stream, watching them do the live stream, and they're reading off who's in the category with me. Mike cackles out loud and says, "You are never going to win." And it was true. But I just was pleased to be nominated, to be honest with you, and I didn't think I'd win. But it was hard to be a part of the process, knowing you probably weren't going to win because it was expensive. And also, it was kind of depressing when you saw who came up. You're like, these guys have years of experience and tons of fans. But this right now, to get the kind of games we like recognized on there, is, I think, a great idea. I think it may be a Pyrrhic victory or come close, but if we keep on doing it, we bring attention to the kind of games that we want to see. And the ENNIEs does that. So.
And that is a really, really well said, reason for doing it, is that it'll support the games that we want to see, but more importantly, it's a chance for us to prove that we can really kick ass. Right?
Yeah. Okay. But I was trying to temper expectations. I look at it, I think Starfinder's on there, and there's like, you see the list. It says Starfinder Packed Worlds. There's 19 authors, and then you see the guy above it. There's one. The one guy spent his whole life trying to work on that.
Yeah.
And so, labors of love deserve the love that they don't get sometimes at the ENNIEs. And that's just the way it is, because of the way it's built. But I think we have a chance.
All I was saying was that yes, you've got a really well thought out thing behind it, but that it's often more fun to do the right thing for stupid reasons.
That I agree with.
One of the cool things I think about where the OSR is today is there's more people playing 5th edition than ever. And you have, I think, like you mentioned, my show is similar to your show in the way that I will bring on people. I like to relate anything to the OSR, really. So there is aspects of 5th edition that can be played in an old school way, like you mentioned. Like a few of my guests I've had on, because I feel like the bigger the OSR gets, that style of play and bringing new people in, the longer it's gonna, the longer it'll live, basically. So I had Ben Milton. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He does.
Oh yeah.
I had Ben Milton on my show, and he did. We did a review of the Dark of Jacob Hurst's game. I can't even think of it. Hot Springs Island, right? We did a review of that together, and it was awesome. He was on, and I think that pushed some of my listenership, because he's definitely one of those people who came from 5th edition and is really pushing OSR product to people who are more involved with 5th edition.
And I should jump in here and let people know, since we didn't mention it, Ben Milton runs another YouTube channel which is called Questing Beast, and it's a great channel, and you'll see that it's on one of the selected channels here on the YouTube page if you're watching this on YouTube. So I recommend clicking on that and going and taking a look at Questing Beast after you've gone and listened to some of the podcasts.
And voted on the ENNIEs. Don't forget to vote on the ENNIEs.
Right, all that stuff, and subscribing to the channel, and giving money to the Patreon. But after that, you can go
and listening to the podcast.
I mentioned that. Yeah,
he did.
I'm going to make sure he said it twice.
Okay.
So the other OSR podcast is Fear of a Black Dragon, and one of the guys is Jason Cordova, who does that, and he is the mastermind behind the Gauntlet, which is a very large community on Google Plus, and it's also a podcast network, and they have hundreds of games every month that they do through their Patreon. So if you become a patron to them, then you get into their Google Hangout games, and they just do hundreds of games. And it's not all story games. There are some OSR games there, and they also have a Gauntlet Con that they do once a year, and I ran games through that. And there was a big following. There were people from all over the world playing in my Gauntlet Con game that had heard of Hobbs and Friends, and I had no idea. One of the guys that pushes it is Rich Rogers, and he does +1 Forward, which is a Dungeon World game. Another great guy. And when Jason Cordova was on, my whole purpose there, I was talking to Matt earlier on the phone about this today. The idea of story games and OSR games being so different is really not true. It's really more like a horseshoe image. So we all, OSR guys are over here and story game guys are over here. But we're really close when we're talking about that. And if you look at the horseshoe where other people are, they fit farther and they get farther away from each other. But when you get to the ends, the guys who are really playing it and really into it, they're actually much, much closer than you would think. It's a Dungeon World game, even though it uses very different mechanics. And I would not say it's an OSR game. The feel of the game was built to feel like an OSR game. So it's really not that different. It's just a different way of getting to the same type of game, really. And I think that's cool. And Jason was a great guy, and he's gone through a lot of trials and tribulations to make the Gauntlet what it is. So a huge proponent for exclusivity in gaming. So I wouldn't say his podcast is an OSR podcast exactly, but and I told him that, and we had a big joke about it. Because it's really he takes all the OSR products, a huge gamut of them, and they do a very good, published isn't the word I'm looking for, but very well done podcast. The audio is
produced.
Great. Yeah, perfectly produced, exactly. Well produced, a very tight format like my show. My show is 40 minutes long, very tight format. It's not scripted in any way. Their show is scripted, but my show is not scripted in any way. But a very good production values, and it's cool hearing them talk about not only the OSR products themselves, but ways that you could use those products and be a better GM or have better games. Even though he's talking about story games, it's certainly things that you could actually change and use in your own OSR games, or heck, any game, really. It's just really good advice about how to run games. And the other guy is Tom McGrenery, I think is how you pronounce it. And I would tell anyone to go and listen to it. They've done LOTFP stuff. They did Jason Schultz's products. They've done tons of different products, and they do a good job of them. And but it's really about how to do story games, but you could still use that information for any type of game. So
I'm a neo OSR guy because I came in after like all of that was already established, and I never heard of story games until I was already making OSR games, and then I couldn't figure out originally like why there was any kind of rift, because it seemed to me the joy of the older games was we weren't bogged down in there's 15 different mechanics to do this thing. You're trying to move along so the mechanics don't stop you from telling the story, and I can never figure out the difference. And I think it must have come down to personalities, because it always does.
Well, there's a different structure to it as well, isn't it? The story games usually have mechanics that move the story, as well as just the people's decisions.
There's less of a simulation aspect to it, I think, but I think the goal is to be part of a big story, and I think in the end, that's both the goals.
Yeah, but
exactly.
But the games, but as qua game, there's a different.
Yeah, lots to learn from each other, I think, though.
Oh, for sure. And any of the stuff you can use goes back and forth. One of my good friends and your good friends as well, Edwin, once told me.
Oh,
I'm interviewing Edwin in like 2 days. So.
Oh, okay, nice.
Work,
so he said people used to say that we game to write interactive stories together. That's what he said. But he really feels like a better way to say it is to discover interactive stories together, because the story isn't, when you say writing, it feels like you've already got an outline and you know what the story is going to be. But when you say discover, that means no one knows what the story is going to be. The GM doesn't know, the players don't know, nobody knows. So when we're discovering it together, it's more like emergent storytelling, which both systems are going to do. And like Matt said, there's a lot more codified rules for story games to get to the same place, where the GM pretty much has almost all the narrative power in an OSR game.
Yep.
Where in a story game, that narrative power is actually more equalized out to other people. And I think that came from playing an OSR or a trad game when you were in grade school and you had a really bad GM who had all the narrative power and maybe abused that power. And so there was a push towards giving that narrative power to everyone, so it was more fair. So it was just like an experience of bad GMs that maybe created a whole different type of game, which can be way more focused. It doesn't try to do almost everything like a trad game does, D&D or OSR, where we're just going to say, yep, you can run any kind of D&D game you want using these rules and it can be whatever. Well, when you're playing a story game, a lot of times it won't be that way. It's like, we're going to play a very focused game where these are your things and we're going to tell this very specific story. We don't know what the ending is, but we kind of know like it's going to be much more, almost scripted isn't the right word, but just focused so tightly that it's going to end up being in the same place all the time.
Yeah.
So that's
anyway,
my.
Let's dial back though from the story games, because what we're really focusing more on here is the OSR type of approach.
The OSR.
There we go. So and you know, plus I've got an awful lot of 5th edition players who watch the show too, but again, it's the intersectional. I think they're the people who've realized that when, sort of similar to where you were talking about the intersection between story games and the OSR, there's a very large intersection between 5th edition and the OSR.
I think 5th edition was one of the best things to happen in the OSR. I think it is allowed. I think we're going to grow because of it, because it allows that style of play that it didn't have to. They actually emphasized it in the rule book. I think I'm very grateful for it. So.
Yeah, no, I think that whole thing worked out well for us. So, Jason, more thoughts other than voting for you for the ENNIE Awards, which I'm gonna do more videos on this whole topic, and I'm gonna remind people before the ENNIEs that they need to do it, and you can help me, pushing all of that. But what else would you say if people, let's say that someone's watching this and they've already subscribed to my channel and they've already given money to my Patreon and they're considering maybe they're going to go and listen to your podcast. Tell them what they're going to find and what they're going to enjoy.
Well, I'd already said that I don't know why people listen, but other people tell me that they really enjoy the conversational aspect of the show, where I have people from all over the OSR. Some people you've heard of, some people you've never heard of because they've not produced anything, they haven't done anything. A good example is my buddy, excuse me, Jose Lacario, who is one of the funniest human beings on the planet. And he hasn't really produced anything. He used to run a Stonehell game on G+ that was an open game, but super funny. And the conversations that we'll have seem to be very engaging and humorous while having content that might help you in your games. One of the series that I do on the show is called Hex Talk, which we kind of went through the whole process of how you might want to create a hex crawl, why you would want to create a hex crawl in sandbox gaming in general. And it got a lot of accolades, enough that we're actually going to start another podcast called Hex Crawl with just the 3 of us. But
yeah, and if you would send me the link to that one, because I'd like to put that down, because that sounds like a really interesting topic. And then what I'll do is I'll put it down in the description underneath the video.
I do want to say that I think that it's cool that you have people that, because I think having produced anything is a bad standard, because we're not all trying to be producers.
Mm-mm. Yeah, we lost Zach, but
I'm back. Hold on.
That was for speaking heresy.
That's right. No, honestly, no. But I think that just because that's not the bar we should cross as you produce something, because running a bunch of games for people and sharing.
What he was going to say.
I'm not speaking anymore. I don't know what the hell happened to the camera.
Okay, well, I will go ahead and finish what you were going to say, though, because it's a lot like what I've got in some of the descriptions of my channel, which is that I've talked to people who are famous and people who ought to be. There are all kinds of functions in a community, and one of them is writing, but one of them is art. One of them is commenting on the community, like Jason does, and like I do, where we get people talking, about it at a sort of a meta level, or talking about how can you design something well if you're a DIY DM. And there are the people who just go out there and run the games and bring people into that sort of idea. I had a thing with Bill Sylvie who does a lot of that. And so, yeah, I mean, somebody's not being a producer should not in any way, I think, downgrade the kind of influence that they ought to be able to pull on a show like this, a show like yours. Those are people that it's really, they're the less expected. You get more interesting stuff from those people too, I think, than you do from the producers.
Yeah, they're new at it, and so you never know what they're going to say, right? They could say some great stuff, they could say some crazy stuff. And I mean, there's people, artists that help me do my zine, because I do Hobbs and Friends zine as well. And the artist that I've had on there the most is Craig Brasco, who is like an actual art professor in Atlanta, Georgia, who has done only very few things. But since he's been on my live stream and in the zine, he's actually gotten more jobs in the community. So I think that's awesome. And like you say, the people who are running games all over the place and pushing games like Dungeon Crawl Classics, which is to me a very good OSR game, very new. Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, same thing, new on the scene, but definitely give that same feel of the games. And so if you came to listen to Hobbs and Friends, like I say, it's got a very tight format. So the first 10 minutes or so is going to be introducing the guest, which will talk about how we knew each other, what games we've been playing, and kind of I always do a segment called Everything About You, which is based on the Ugly Kid Joe song, I Hate Everything About You. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I always talk about that because I didn't want to do an introduction show where people had to come and listen to me just talk about who I am and why I'm doing the show. So I started that segment instead where I could bring out pieces of myself as the show went on. So every show I try to have something that someone doesn't know about me, and then I have my guest or guests do the same thing. So not only are you learning about me in the show, you're also maybe learning about people you don't know or people maybe you do know. And then we'll usually get into a main topic, which is going to be all over the place. I do like a designer where I'm going to have designers on, like I just had Alexander Macros on, Adventure Conqueror King from Autark. That show will drop on Thursday, which I'm expecting a bunch of lash back because of politics, but I think he's a great designer, and I think it's a very good game, and he had some really cool insights about why he chose some of the aspects of that game compared to other games like the attack throw, or why did you have proficiencies into a BX chassis game, and sometimes I'll get really crunchy and talk about heavy design topics like that, or other times it might just be I'll have my cousin Patrick Strevens Hawk on, who was my very first GM in 1978, who stopped playing for 30 years and didn't know there was a game, OSR style. As far as he knew, that's the only style of game, because he never played any games for 40 years until he started gaming with me again in the last year or two. So it can be all over the gamut, and you're going to find, hopefully, you'll hear about my cat because she's very noisy and always involved with me.
There are some definite OSR cats out there. Eric Tankar's cat comes and shoves its ass against the camera every single time. Here, hang on, hold again, Jen.
This is Cleo.
That's Cleo.
She's always involved. Yeah, she's likes to be on my lap. I'm in my studio, the kitchen table, because this is a high production thing. This is where I do all my podcasts as well. A lot of times like I say, I'll do a product spotlight, or I'll do a segment I call the status of the OSR, where we'll talk about the politics of the OSR, or is the OSR splintering? Has Discord and Slack lessened, our activity together as a group? I never say community. I always say we're actually a movement, or because we're not really a community. We have community aspects, but we're not. The OSR isn't a community.
No, it's several linked communities, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and what are those? That was one of the things that I really kind of wanted to ask you. It's maybe getting away from my show and more talking about you, Matt. But you have a real good idea of what the OSR is historically over the period of time. I'm curious to. I was actually surprised that you're actually way more involved in it than I expected. Like, I've been calling this group of the OSR the Art House OSR. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before.
Yeah.
Instead of DIY, but it's very similar. I think that's the name that they use the most with themselves. And then you have the group of people who only play, the original games. And then you have the other group who's somewhere in the middle, who just, I call the neo-grognards, basically. And I think there's really three groups. And I think, unfortunately, that Discord, Slack, people are leaving G+ for whatever reason. I think a lot of it is because the G+ functionality is losing what it once had. So now what are people going to do? So now they go to their individual Discord channels where they're only surrounded by those few people. You go to the Frog God channel, you go to Tenkar's Tavern Chat, you go where Autar.
This is actually something that I was trying to address by setting up. I did a Kickstarter just for a couple $1,000s to start a website called Old School Gamer Radio, and eventually ended up switching that into the Uncle Matt's D&D Studio for various, long story about how the goals and things shifted on that. But that was what my patrons sort of advised. I got together with them. But yeah, I think that social media, because the thing is that it used to be, when you're talking about the long ago history of the OSR, there was only one place, and that was forums. There were only 2 or 3 of them maximum. And so people went to all 3 of those forums, and it was a very long cycle conversation, a lot of it very thoughtful. And there have been several steps that we've gone through that have, each one of which has splintered the community to a certain degree. There was first there were blogs. And of course, blogs begin to separate people into the fans of the different bloggers, and blogs, but that not so much, because all the blogs had the links to the other blogs. So there was still some connection there. Then you get to G+, and you see it spread out a great deal more. There's a lot less reference to other people. It's still there in Google+, though, but it's not nearly as much as it was with the blog rolls. Then you get onto Facebook. There's even less. Now the only way that people are seeing it is if a friend happens to pop up on a feed, which isn't necessarily going to happen because of the way that Facebook's done. So that's splintered even more. And now you've got Discord in places that are completely disconnected from each other. You have to find them from outside to get in, and there's no linkage from one to the other. And so I think, and what my idea was, hey, I'll put links, to all of these different things in there, but it turned out that the functionality of a website that's not an incredibly expensive one is not really up to doing all the things it needed to do, because we could list blogs, but there is no
blog roll like there used to be.
Yeah, there's no plug-in thing that can tell you here's the most recent post. So it was like, what I can do that they can't is I can put a list of blogs next to a list of YouTube channels, next to a list of podcasts. Mm-hmm. But looking at the blog list, it doesn't say which the most recent one is, which means that anybody who's got, a blogger spot is doing a better job for blogs, than we could on that. So anyway, that sort of got shifted around, but I totally agree with you. There's an ongoing, because of social media, there's an ongoing splintering of the community, probably all communities. I mean, probably the model train people are having the same thing happen to them.
No, I think it's funny. I went to a war game convention, and they had the same kind of problem where people who played Napoleonics almost never interacted with the World War II guys.
Yeah,
it's funny because from the outside, because I'm not into that scene that much, it seems kind of like, well, that's kind of silly. But that's what we worry about incessantly, and it's not, because they have a hobby they love it breaks down, and recruitment and stuff I think is harder. But I never thought we'd play these games again either. So.
Here's something really funny to break in. Isaac, you must have just joined into the episode, because we actually just were talking about Hex Talk, and they are planning on starting a series on that. So you're a happy camper. Isaac Eccles just said, don't forget Hex Talk. Those episodes killed. Should be its own pod. So
if I could go back a couple notes here.
Yeah.
First of all, I invited everyone I know on all the social media I have, that if anyone could make me laugh on the live chat today, that I would send them a free PDF. But I can't find the live chat anywhere. So if anyone was making me laugh, I don't know where it is.
I'll tell you how to do it. Okay. You know that watch page where I gave you the link of where to watch it? Okay, here's what you need to do. You're going to need to go to that page, and then you're going to need to mute. Then you're going to need to mute YouTube, or else you're going to get the echo going back and forth.
And how do I mute?
You should see the chat on the right-hand side next to the next to the pretty pictures is the chat.
I don't know how to mute YouTube, and then I can't hear you when I have it on.
What you do is this: go to the YouTube tab up at the top and right-click on it.
Okay.
And when you right-click on it, one of your choices should be
Got it.
Site.
Because I tried to do that earlier, and then I was like, I can't follow anything. I'm confused.
No, that's how you do it, and that's why I said I had to screw around with my windows, because what I've got, see, I can't talk if I'm looking at what I was doing 20 seconds ago. It screws me up. So I have to be looking at the actual live thing, but I have to have the chat thing, everything moved around. So
I had to do the same thing before, but I just forgot how I do it. This is actually a lot of my fan base in this chat that I'm seeing.
So Matt Jackson, who is an expert at haircuts.
He's also a cartographer.
I know.
You know, he's been on your show.
Yeah, I've had him on the show. I'm just trying to get you to laugh at their stuff.
No, I'm not laughing at that. That's terrible. So the other thing I was going to talk to you about is, your Kickstarter. I remember when that came out, and I actually talked about it on my podcast, and I actually had some feedback. This is why the OSR is so weird, because it's people who like games, and they can be from anywhere, any creed, any political belief or whatever. But there were a lot of people saying that it was a method of gatekeeping. So now you could say what was OSR and what wasn't OSR. And I felt like that was, it kind of saddened me that happened, because OSR Today was the same thing with Jason Paul McCartan. He was trying to gather people to get involved in the OSR and make it, have a local place for everyone to do everything. So keep people together instead of letting them fragment. Glenn Seal did a map every Friday for OSR Today. Shout out to Jason. I just met him at Origins in person. I've always known he was a cool guy, but it was very nice to meet him in person. Crazy Scottish bastard. Anyway, so those are the two things that I wanted to go back to. So
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Well, you know what? I think gatekeeping is an issue in this group, and it's probably not so much in your Neo Grognard group. But going back to the way old history of the OSR, part of the reason that a lot of the oldest group in the OSR are concerned about gatekeeping, it was a huge issue back then. There were the first edition D&Ders were all like, are you playing Gygaxian first edition, or and then there were just the edition wars and stuff were really there is a reason why that's a valid thing to watch out for, and also the fact that we well, I was going to, it used to, and the other thing is that there used to be, only a couple of people who were the sort of real big personalities in there. It was, Stuart Marshall and James Malasevsky, and I've never learned how to pronounce his name right, but he was running the Grognardio blog. Probably I fitted in there too, and there really was, there were gatekeeping issues there where people were like, oh, you're not, OSR and stuff. So I very much understand why people, raised that. Makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But then what's the answer? That's what I would like to know. I mean, we all kind of understand the problem now. I think it's time to stop looking at problems and trying to figure out solutions. So.
Well, I think it's the idea that, look, what we really are is a kitchen sink. I mean, it's got to do with a general idea of how to play, and and you can probably list those on a couple of hands or less. The sort of the DM does have a very high degree of agency, and there's a reason for that. It's so that they can run a game in a particular way, and it makes it more risky with a bad DM, and I think it ups your abilities if you are a better DM. But those are trade-offs that are involved. But it's a particular style of play when you've got more DM agency than you do in, for example, much more so than, say, 3rd edition, and still more so than in 5th edition, although it's come back. And there are just other things like that you can, and as long as you're like, yeah, it's a kitchen sink, anybody who's got even some overlap with that, you don't step on their fingers.
Well, I found that I didn't know what anybody meant by gatekeeping. And when I did Whisper and Venom, I didn't know a lot of people. And I got a bunch of pushback. Like, why would you make an expensive box set? That's crazy. Who needs this kind of stuff? And I'm like, you do. You need this kind of stuff. What are you talking about? I just didn't even think of it as a problem so much as like, it was just, people they haven't seen it yet. And so if they haven't seen it yet, I liked it. I wanted them to see it. I didn't feel like pushed away or like told to get out. They were resistant, and some of them bought it, some of them didn't, and it's all cool. See, I think that I wasn't was not there early enough to see it really bad, or I just was not paying enough attention, which is probably also true. But to me, it was just, okay, sit in your form. I'm good. So I think that we're sensitive to it in a way that 8% of it isn't as big a deal, I think, as it can be. 20% is real bad, though, I think, for newer players and sometimes for like people who we're not inclusive. And when you do those things, then you're doing a disservice. So.
Yeah, but it's a good question. What's the solution? What do you think the solution is, Jason?
Oh, see, I shouldn't pose these questions, should I? I think the more education, the more communication that we can do amongst us, all of us, and kind of try and find a central ground and the best way to go about things. I would like to think that when you said there's a group of people that believe that their community could be clean of politics and the things that cause strife. It used to be back in the day, you didn't talk about religion and you didn't talk about politics in polite conversation. And I'm not saying back in the day was better than today, but I feel like we could have less drama in our gaming niches today if we followed some of that advice. But
what about demi-human level limits? I mean, there were things that were just
demi-human level limits was also.
I was going to say, did you say something about descending AC? I didn't hear what you said, Zach.
Yes, THACO. Let's talk about it.
Alignment.
Now, all right. Hey, listen, we've got a lot of people in the room right now. So, and all most of y'all probably coming in because Jason, it told you that you had to come in and make him laugh. But the thing that you missed right at the beginning is that what we're going to do is we're going to sweep the fucking ENNIEs, like I said right at the beginning of the thing. We're going to get Jason at either a gold or a silver ENNIE, and also all the other OSR folks that are out there. And I did a list, and I can't find it right now, but I know Zach Smith's out there with about 4 different things. Glenn Seal is out there for Midlands, and we're just going to go out and we're going to harvest ENNIE awards for all of them by getting a whole bunch of people together and just coordinating it, as a Roman legion moving forward. Anyway, okay, so now y'all know what my plan is for Jason, and he's been laboring under my enthusiasm for the entire interview. So.
It's not even laboring. I wouldn't call it that. Riding on clouds really is what I would say. I've always been humbled that anyone is interested in what I have to say at all. And to know that the show could get nominated, let alone possibly win, would be a very surprising thing to me. Like I say, I'm just a regular guy who loves playing games and likes talking about them. And by having the show, I get the opportunity to talk with the people that I've admired, whether they're in the industry or if they're not, and they're just guys I ended up playing with on Google Plus Hangouts or something.
You're obviously going to be no good at this whole thing, because you just. Matt Jackson, I'm going to need to talk to you because you've got the military and the logistics shit to get this thing organized. So we'll be getting Matt Jackson in there, and
you can't object when he has no microphone.
Huh?
Right. You can't object. You're recruiting people without their ability to say no.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah, this is the way to do it. And so Matt Jackson's like, so we're fighting someone by voting for people solely because of the OSR. Yes, and you're in charge, Matt. So I would stop questioning the mission statement if I were you. So
Matt maybe didn't hear you in the beginning with how the ENNIEs actually work. So for those who are watching this later, sorry, but the ENNIEs are actually controlled by voting, and it is a popularity contest. And we are OSR people.
Did he make you laugh?
He did make me. He already has all my stuff, though. It's not fair for him. I mean, I'll send it to him. But
Matt, for those who are watching who don't see the chat, Matt Jackson just posted, yeah, that's how the military works. You can't hear, so you give it out. So I'll take that as accepting the.
I can't believe Matt's the one that made me laugh. Jose was trying so hard. But yeah, it is a popularity contest, and we want to get behind the popular people that we like, right? So yeah. I agree.
Like I said, it's not just permitted under the ENNIEs. This is how it works. This
expected.
This is the game. Everybody else is going out, and they're going to back their people. And so so we're going to go out, back our people, and so that's the name of the game. Think of it as a game, a blood sport, one in which there are casualties.
I was going to say, I didn't see what Zach was nominated for. Have you guys actually read any of the Midderlands? Obviously, you did, Mr. Glazar.
Midderlands is great, and the cartography is beautiful. I've not read Zach's newest one, which is it's Frozen, or
it's Frostbitten and Mutilated. Yeah, and I haven't read it. I hadn't read it either. In fact, this is the first time that I had seen that title, so I must not. Again, Facebook.
I have a copy of Red and Pleasant Land. He actually beat me for a Three Castles Award, and I deserved to get beat. It was really innovative and different, and it was well presented and everything else. And so his stuff, I think, is great. He's a strange dude. We watch him on Monday nights on Matt's games, and he's a unique individual, but his stuff is really solid and really interesting and worth buying. And so it was worth voting for, basically.
And then Glenn Seal, and I've had both of those guys on before, but Glenn Seal is a lot of talents there, because he's not just a good writer, he's also a phenomenal illustrator. Mm-hmm. And so we'll haul him back. Yeah, I may try and get a bunch of you guys all on one thing, and we'll just all talk. Maybe we'll do that. I don't know.
Glenn Seal makes great Photoshop brushes, man. He really does have a talent stack. It's something else.
I see Jim Wampler is actually in the chat as well. Welcome, Mr. Wampler.
Yeah. Hey, Jim.
Did they not, did MCC get submitted? I don't know if Goodman Games puts things, Spellburn obviously was last year, but I'm not sure.
A lot of people don't with the ENNIEs. I mean, Frog God doesn't submit anything to the ENNIEs because it is very expensive to do, especially if it's an expensive
product. Yeah, especially for product. Yeah,
it's Turkey and Poland. That's expensive to send a box set of Turkey and Poland. It winds up being $500 to do the shipping and everything. So,
yeah, I can see that. If you guys wouldn't mind, I actually last year, not this year's Three Castles Awards, but when we were talking about awards, I was going to try and talk to you and see what you thought about this. We talked briefly about the ENNIEs. What do you guys have any thoughts on the Three Castle Awards or the Rodneys at Gamehole or Origins Awards, I guess? I wanted to take the opportunity to last year, not this year, but last year in 2017 at the Three Castle Awards, my buddy, actually two of my buddies were up for the award and they were finalists. And the way that the award ceremony was done, I thought was really horrible. And I actually did a whole segment about it on my podcast. And I wanted to say that this year they did a much better job. So I wanted to accommodate those, except for Zach being up there. I don't know why he was up there, but
right.
Everybody else did a really good job. Doug and Mike did a really good job going over it and talking and saying who all the finalists were, what the process was for them to be found, and then having my buddy Greg Gillespie win for a very deserving book was really great. So I really wanted to say, I'm not sure I made a difference, but I kind of feel like I did, because I actually went out and said this was horrible, and a lot of people told me, hey, I should go talk to Mike or Doug and let them know how I felt. I never did, because I was nervous, because I'm really a nobody, but it was really cool to see them change.
Dude. Not anymore.
It was really cool to see progress happen, and them to take their own award ceremony as the importance that it is. I believe that if someone wants something to be important, they have to treat it importantly. And I really think they did a much better job of that this year. And shout out to Greg, man. Congrats, brother.
Yep. So you got Eric Tankar almost kicked in the balls by winning that award. So
did you see that picture?
Yeah, I did. It's fun.
The story behind that picture. The story behind that picture is actually pretty funny, because I just saw James, and I saw Greg sitting there, with his award next to him. I'm like, hey man, let's photobomb this goofy picture about Greg, and then we'll post it all over the internet. I had no idea that it was going to come out and look exactly like James was trying to nutshot Tenkar. It was just perfect the way that it came out.
And so that's what made it such a famous photo.
We've all wanted to, but Rach has the opportunity to.
Yep. So yeah, no, I think that I think there was a lot of attention paid to getting the award ceremony done better. Part of it also was that Doug was on some pretty heavy chemo drugs that prior year too, and I think that had a lot to do with his ability kind of to focus on stuff. But it has always been the case that the other nominees tend to get shorter shrift in the award ceremony on the three castles, and that's even before the thing with Doug. And so that, I think, is something where they definitely did listen to what you were saying and put it into practice, in terms of this is something where we could really change the way we do it, because it used to be all the focus was on the person who ultimately won the award. And so I think I think you definitely had an effect there, and seeing that a little bit from the inside, because I was one of the judges on it this year. So,
really, well, I appreciate that. Do you guys? What happened to the Origin Awards? Because weren't they they used to be like a really big award thing? And why do you think that the ENNIEs, to some people, seems bigger? Is it because a lot of the larger, like WotC and Paizo, do the ENNIEs, where I don't usually see them at the Three Castle Awards or at Gamehole Awards, the Rodneys. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, sort of not, because the thing is, I don't know anything about the Origins Award, so I just don't have an answer on that one. And on the ENNIEs, I just think they've been around so long, and there's such a large thing. They adopted 5th edition early, which made them sort of friends with Wizards. They adopted Pathfinder early, and so they became friends with Paizo. So it's just, I think that they've got a more direct connection with a lot of the really huge publishers, and the huge publishers, and I think this less and less, but the huge publishers had a huge influence on their fan base. I think now something's changing on the internet, which is that the publishers are no longer nearly as much the opinion leaders as the people who are on the internet doing what you do and what I do, where people engage with the personalities, and they understand that this person's opinions may be utterly subjective, but they like listening to them. And so they've got, these various, admittedly subjective opinions, but that's where they get the raw material for the stuff that they think about is much more from people viewing, eye to eye on the internet, or hearing the voice, whereas it used to be, publishers and forums and, oh, this guy's great because he's the, I don't know, chief operating officer of Frog God Games or something like that.
I'm not sure what that guy thinks, dude.
Zach is the chief operating officer of Frog God Games.
That's interesting.
No one cares what that guy thinks.
I once had Zach tell me that role-playing games really don't have journalists at this point. So it's like you say, it's people more like you, not like me. I mean, I'm very small fry, really. But do you feel like that is do you accept that responsibility? Have you ever considered it like that you do have maybe a strong voice and a way to manipulate or direct the way purchasing can be done, which in the long run, if we can control the consumer or help be available to the consumers and do reviews or talk about different personages or let people get to know the personages that are doing things or playing games with those products. What do you think? I guess what in general do you think about that?
Well, in terms of whether I accept responsibility, you can ask Zach. I accept responsibility.
It's almost amazing. It's kind of like, like a kind of a counter spell. You suck and you say something like, "Hey, can you do this?" Or like it's already off of him. He's already forgotten. It's actually very. It's a skill that's actually pretty impressive.
It is, yeah. No, I don't accept. No, I don't accept responsibility. I want to do what I want to do. I've always been like that. It's like, look, it's my hobby. I wrote Osric, I wrote Swords and Wizardry, but I did all of that, as a fan, and I refuse to be a professional. I refuse to be a statesman. I get to keep doing my fun shit. And sometimes that means I'm going to do something wrong. Sometimes it means I'm going to show favoritism, to somebody that I happen to know. Like you're the guy who we're talking to about Sweep the Ennies because it was you. I didn't know, I wasn't familiar with Fear of a Black Dragon. So you're getting the big boost here. Does that make me a poor statesman? Yeah, but it's me, so I get to do it.
I think that what I was talking about when I was talking to Jason was if you have a press, and that's their role, is to be a press for an industry, it always bogs down to they're bringing professionalism where sometimes there just isn't any. You're looking for things that just aren't there, and you start bringing in topics that aren't related to gaming because that's what you do. You're a journalist, right? And sometimes they're as divisive as they are helpful. And I think that it's much more fun to have a enthusiast press. Like no one would ever accuse Eric Tenkar of not being enthusiastic, right? But they also wouldn't accuse him of being a journalist that often either. But he's great and he's perfect for this kind of stuff, and so are other people who do the same types of things. So when you talk about a journalist or a press, it is we're guys who are 40 years old and talk about dragons, and we love it, and that doesn't, I think, necessitate a professional press coverage.
Yeah,
Mr. Glazar, this is very serious business, sir.
Oh, no one's got to tell me how serious business is.
I'm the CEO.
Deserve to be covered. Am I working in my pajamas for 10 hours a day? Does that deserve to be covered anywhere? No.
It just has been, though.
I've made a list of 35 monsters to cut from the Toma horrors. Whoopee.
No, see, that's big news. That's the kind of thing that that people really do. People like to hear about People like to hear about idiosyncratic shit. They like to see us being who we really are. That's what's fun. Nobody wants to see nobody wants to see professional journalism in the gaming industry. What they want to see is people who go out and cover stuff in a fun way. And that's why I invite people to be on the show who are not name brand figures and stuff, because like the name brand the people who are out there doing the real stuff are much more interesting a lot of the time.
I had someone ask me if I would do a stream where I just would work for a regular work day for an hour, and I thought about that. I thought first the emails would be too embarrassing for my boss just because they're just 2 words long, and the other thing is it's so much like an office job, it's kind of weird. But then I get mad at myself because it is pretty interesting and exciting. When I say that, I'm downplaying that we're all making neat stuff, and I get lucky enough to make neat stuff. And Matt invited me on this about 10 minutes before it started. I'm like, okay, hold on, let me get ready.
I was gonna say, Zach, was it your mom that said that would be interesting?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm just kidding.
No. So she would not think it's interesting at all. I'm okay with that. That's why I can sleep at night. I'm not worried about that. I don't have a childhood issue about that.
Good.
All right, guys. So so Zach, what needs to happen is that you need to get your own show.
Yeah. We'll think about it. We'll have to think about it. But I think that I have plenty of things to say, and almost none of them interesting. So that makes it perfect.
Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
I'll talk to you.
Is this your, you have what? You have a live stream game, right? Your Jordabuba?
Yeah,
Jordabuba. Yeah, there's 2 of them actually.
Okay.
One where I use 5th edition rules, and then in the same world setting I use Swords and Wizardry, original D&D rules. And the 2 parties actually well, pretty much they cause problems for each other rather than solving problems for each other. But they know what the other guys are doing. They hear about them in the city.
And are both of those like going through your miniatures? Since are you going through your miniature and your stuff? I've watched a couple of them. Matt Jackson is the one who told me to watch them, and I've watched a couple of them. I actually have trouble watching streams, even though I do one myself. Is that?
No, me too. Me too. I would not watch my show.
So this was actually the reason I brought this up is because I want to talk about some other stuff I do.
Yeah, don't do that. Do that.
So I actually have another podcast.
Well, you know what? The other option that we can do, Jason, is we can do another interview if you want. That's got like a separate title. That's like other stuff Jason does.
That sounds great, man. I enjoyed it. I really want you to be on my show, though. Still, okay. I forgot I was gonna mention that. I have a lot of people on my show. I interviewed Frank Menser on my show. I just did Alexander, and I've had quite a few people say they would be on the show. I just haven't gotten to them yet. I have a big long list. But when I was at North Texas, my biggest fanboy moment of the whole show was when I was walking out to go to eat lunch, and I was hanging out with my buddies, some call-outs, Craig Stokes and Frank Brooks and Ryan Moore and Grady Moore at North Texas. I stopped because I saw Matt Finch there, and I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity. I can ask him. This is going to be awesome. I can ask him to be on my show. You know, everyone else was kind of ahead of me.
The thing is, we don't do praise on me in this show.
Well,
so,
let me finish the story. Let me finish the story. It's not the most great.
It's a story. Okay, I know what the story is. Go ahead.
You already know. So yeah, so I meet him, and I don't know. I don't know if you're smoking or you're coming in from the area, you know, where
smoking.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, it's Matt. It'd be awesome. I'm like, hey, Matt, how you doing, man? It's really awesome, you know, to talk. I've actually talked to you a few times. I don't know if you remember, but I see you out there. I'm like, hey, how's it going? You're like, oh, hey, hi. You know, very nice. I could tell you had no idea who I was. I go, hey, I'm Jason. I think I might even said Jason Hobbs. I don't know. I'm Jason Hobbs, and you know, it's great to talk to you and see you again. And I was really hoping you could be on my podcast. But I had sent you a G+ message, and you never responded. So I was like, I didn't know what you're going to say. And you go, well, you're like, oh yeah, I really like doing podcasts. I could still tell you had no clue who I was. And you're like, if you really want to contact me, you should, this is my email. And I put my phone out right away, and I'm typing it in. I'm like, all right, I'm going to send you an email from my email so you have mine, so we can, you know, schedule something if you want to. And you're like, yeah, okay, super nice the whole time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to lunch. One of my buddies is back there looking at me, you know, smiling. And you start to walk away. I mean, we walk about 10 feet away from each other, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, Hobbs and Friends. And then you just run over right away. You had no idea who I was, but when you figured it out, it was, to me, it was like, wow, yeah, it does know who I am, I guess. That was awesome. So I really appreciate that.
It just took me a while. The thing is, at conventions, I'm really bad because I'm often in the zone. And people always have multiple different names. Like I've got you filed under Hobbs and Friends. Instead of under Jason Hobbs, and you know, people have their emails. They used to have internet handles when they were on forums, and I'm not real good with names and faces in the first place. So it's like that's always at a convention. I tell people, you know, I may introduce myself to you 4 different times before I've got, you know, the name down. So
yeah, it's totally cool. I just thought it was awesome to me. It wasn't because you didn't know who I was. It was because you did. It took you a little bit, but you did. So I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah, well, it finally clicked, you know.
I always say hi to Zach, but he never knows who I am either.
I know who you are. I've been talking to you like 3.5 years.
Since I bought your Whisper and Venom stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zach, a lot of times Zach knows people and just doesn't want to admit that he knows them.
He used to work with me at Frog God, so.
All right, so so Wednesday, Jason, we get together. We'll target that. We'll get together and we'll do probably a recorded one on other stuff Jason does.
Okay.
How about that?
Next Wednesday, you mean?
Today's
Wednesday.
Today's Wednesday.
Yeah, next Wednesday.
All right, the 11th.
Yeah, it's just I can't do it. Well, or we could do it on Saturday or Sunday, but Monday and Tuesday.
Off the air?
I was going to say, this seems like a funny conversation.
Off the air, this is really boring to anybody watching it.
Okay. I was planning on getting real boring anyway, but all right. So in that case, we'll go ahead and let's wrap it up. And so, guys, after I take us off broadcast, we're still able to talk to each other. Okay. So say goodbye to all your friends, Jason, all your fans.
Hey guys, thanks for showing up. I really appreciate it. You've all been very, very supportive, and I hope you guys know how much I love you. Thanks.
And I will say to everybody that's out there, no matter what kind of Dungeons and Dragons it is that you play, imagine the hell out of it. Zach, you do
God
your
damn it, Zach.
God damn it, Zach. Yeah, okay. All right, bye everybody.